Hey, it's Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and it's Tuesday. It's October 11th. This will be our chart lesson for the day, and you can see here that this is today's bar on the daily chart, and you can see that it's mostly just a neutral kind of bar, and that's what we basically had another range day today. We did have a little early rally, started mid-morning or so, that looked like we might finally rally off these lows, and then they sold it off just as quick as it rallied. So unfortunately, there wasn't a lot of good chance to get in that late afternoon sell-off or that late day sell-off. But let's flip over there and we'll take a look at it. But here you can see the neutral bar here for the daily chart just kind of confirms the kind of day we had on the 2000 tick chart, which is just a range type day. So uh, let's flip over there. And here's a look at it. You can see the blue area. You can see where we rallied here mid-morning. Really just about the time I posted the chart this morning, we started rallying. Broke out the top of the, failed pretty quickly. Well, I shouldn't say we failed quickly because it took a little bit of time to work back in. It actually took a couple of hours, and then suddenly late this afternoon the bottom just falls out. It runs all the way back down, actually makes a new low for the day, and we bounce some into the close here. Not a whole lot, but we did bounce. So still a lot of trades today. Let's zoom on in and we'll go through those trades. And 7 o'clock came as we're rallying here, and we're just too far away from the EMA and too many unknowns to be taking a short. And you don't really want to go long because we've already had a break, and by this first couple of swings, this thing would usually be over with. So, and unfortunately, you don't get a real good bar up here to go short on. So it just kind of runs down. You get a first entry, then you get a second entry, and look at that big bearish bar on a failure. It broke higher first and turned down. I wouldn't have any problem trading that on the engulfing bar. You're looking for a new low on this cyan colored channel anyway, and we could be going to run all the way back to the other side of the channel, which is what ends up happening. So I like going short there. And then we get a second entry here. Notice first entry, second entry, and that really kind of confirms that trend line across there. Big bearish bar again. That turns out to be a really good trade. If you took that trade, that might be all you need today. Just a single contract down to where until we finally bounced in there would have been 6 points. And if you wrote it all the way down to the other side of the channel, which you should have been looking for a measured move from right in here, or just used a measured move, you're looking at more towards 14 points. And at the very least, I would have just measured this right here and looked for a measured move, and that would have got you down here almost to the low of that move. So that would have been a great target for you. And actually, you might have wanted to measure from here because that's your two-legged correction. You got two legs down, a two-legged correction, and then another leg down that has two legs in it. So, and that gives you a perfect measured move. That would have got you out basically at the very low of the move. That's a perfect measured move. So very good setup there. Then we bounce just right back to the trend line. Unfortunately, there's no setup right there. If you look, that bar's just too neutral, really. I don't know how I managed to grab it right there, I guess. So we'll move it back and correct it. I think that was what we were looking at. But and there's no lower. There is a lower high, but it's way down here, way too far. Again, not a very good signal bar. And then we're bouncing and just kind of going sideways. I don't think you want to go long in here. We had been going back and forth. Maybe you risk a long right here on a failed breakout. Maybe. I just wouldn't do it. Definitely wouldn't here because it's too congested. And then it fails out the top. That's the one you want to look at. pretty nice move. Again, it's right off the key entry point. Relatively small bar too, not much risk, 9 ticks. We do get a lower high here, but unfortunately the signal bar is too green and the next one's an inside bar, and that's the best part of the move, and it's unfortunate, but sometimes that happens. And then we bounce again, and that's just congestion once again. You can't trade anything out of that. Oh, there's nothing there really anyway. And we just kind of drop on down. There is a reversal here, but it doesn't really set up good. It needs to be closer to the. It needs to come off the EMA. There's probably enough room between there and the low and the over and where we're looking for the lows of the range. But when it doesn't break lower there, then it starts to look a little congested. So you just can't take that trade either. And it does drop on down. It's unfortunate. We had a couple of moves like that, like the afternoon drop. You just don't get a lot of opportunity to enter it. Sometimes it happens, just the way it goes. But we drop on down, then you get a second entry short right here. This is kind of no man's land if it was just 2 legs back, but it is congested. There is some range right there. So you could treat that like a failed breakout. It is a second entry short. Plenty of room back to even the midline, but we've been running back and forth from the highs to the lows, so this would be your target here. Then you get a lower high, and I like it a little better. Both of them would have worked. And this one's real close to being red. The only reason I made it red, green, is because and we did come back and test this breakout. This is the range, and we tested it a couple of, actually 1, 2, 3 times. So it's also a triple test, really. So I think you could almost argue for that to be red. It's just a little more advanced kind of trade. So I'll leave it at green. And then that lower high, that's the easier one to take. And it took a second, but it would have been a nice trade. And then we bounced out of there and got a close outside the trend channel line. But notice there's 2 legs up. And we get this lower high right here with a relatively decent sized bar, 10 ticks, very bearish, way away from the EMA. Notice how it gaps over there though. So and when I say that, those bars don't overlap is what I'm saying. And that's because there's a little support across there. But it just drops on down, and notice it doesn't take long. It tries to come back and fill that. Usually they'll try to fill those gaps. But when you're expecting prices to make a new low on this very bearish channel, at least come back and test the low of the range. If it can't get through, then it might go higher, which is what happened. It got through momentarily, and then finally people realize, hey, it's probably a range, and let's get long. But that's a pretty good move. Too choppy down here. Now you got one working up. Notice you get a close outside, new high, very bearish bar. We're still looking for a new low here, so I like that one. I definitely like the lower high with the bearish bar, and you can see, and we still don't quite get that new low, and it just can't go any lower, and it bounces, and it rallies out of there pretty quick. Unfortunately, you don't get a real good setup there. There is a higher low right here, but I don't know if you want to trade that. I definitely wouldn't go long up here. Maybe you trade this one as an engulfing bar. That would be the best I would give that. And then we're just working sideways again. And there is a second, it's not really a second entry. It looks like 2 legs over, but it's just so much sideways. You got to treat that like congestion or sideways action. But you might argue that's a triple test. The problem is there's not much room to these highs. So unless you could get in with a little better entry, so you got room to get out before that high, you can't take that trade. If you can, if it broke higher and it backed up enough to get you in, which I don't think it did, but if it did, you could get in that way. Otherwise, just let it go, because you don't need. You've really already got to close outside a new high. It's just that triple test could send it back up here on a failed breakout and go lower again, or even just test that high and go lower again. When I say high, I mean that resistance across there. But it runs on up, and we're just kind of chopping sideways here again. I just don't see much I like here until finally this is actually a second entry short, and you're looking for a retest of this possible channel. It's a lot of sideways stuff in there, but it's still a channel working down. and then you got 2 legs up on a correction. So you would expect them to try to make a retest of the low, and we might come back down here and test this breakout area again. So I like that second entry, and you could also argue that that's a triple test. 1, 2, 3. So some reasons to like that trade. Of course, it comes down here, it bounces, runs up. There's actually, the problem here is those, this is a failure, but it should be underneath the EMA, but it's so far away you could still trade that if you wanted. So I didn't mark it, but technically if you wanted to take that trade, if you recognize what's going on there, I'll at least give it a green. We drop down here and we get a triple test on the low side, but that's just too sideways there. And it does end up working on up, and then 2 legs down, and you're just sideways and you get a measured move down here. But again, the signal bar is not very good. But watch what happens. You run up, you get a first entry, you shoot up, you get a second entry, and it fails when it breaks above that bar right there. I like going long there on a failure. This trend line continues to hold until you get a break, and you get a first entry, second entry, but then you get a little triple test here. I didn't like the second entry so much because it looks like congestion there, but it is a triple test and congestion and a second entry. So, and you're looking for prices to make a new high, so maybe you take that trade, but when it tries to go lower a third time there and fails, you could call that a triple test right there. The only problem is you got a little resistance right there as well. But this is probably going to go higher. I like it. It's a little bit aggressive. It's real close to being blue. I marked it green, but it's one of those that's real close. So maybe you can take that one. You get this little trend. This is just a retest, so usually you don't even mark these. I marked it just so you could see it there. And you get a couple of moves up to a new high, and then you're headed lower. And I look at this as a double top. So 1 leg down, first entry, second leg down, second entry. And so you'd go short 1 tick below that, and you're just looking to ride it back down to the other side. I mean, we are in an uptrend here, and usually I probably wouldn't mark a short, but we're right at the high of the range too, and you had a little failed breakout. So that's why I like that one. Even though we're still in the green range, there's still a long way to go down. And notice how we went through the EMA and came back and tested it, and that pretty much proves that we're probably, if it turns down, then we're probably coming down to here at a minimum. And we could catch the high of the range here. So that's why I like that one. Normally, if this was just a trend day and a real strong trend, I'd say no, don't try to go short in there. But you got to look at the big picture, and this is a range day, even though we got a trend working up in it. That turns out to be a pretty good move. You get your close outside here. You can't go long. That channel's still in play right there. And you would expect prices to try to make a new low, but they don't. They just rally on up. And that's, the channel obviously is taking precedence over the shorter term down move there. And there's nothing really here to try to trade until up here. And finally you get a first entry, second entry here, but you can clearly see that channel, and we're still way away from the EMA. But notice you get a close outside, move to a new low, and then a higher low. I like taking the higher low, and you might even take this new low, but it's just the first bounce off of that previous resistance, and it did act as support, but I'd want something a little more clear to know we were going higher. And you're probably going to test this high right here on this short-term channel. And plus, the other thing is you've got the break here, and you just do make a new high there. So that's the other thing you got to worry about, is you might have already made a new high. But when it makes the high or low there with it breaks lower and turns up. If it breaks above that, we're probably going to retest this high on this cyan colored channel, and we may get a couple of legs up. Who knows? We might even run back up to the other side here, and you can see it does. It just kind of keeps going. you wouldn't have got anything but a scalp out of that. That's all you're really looking for there. But if you get lucky, maybe you get more. But it runs on up and just suddenly turns. I don't see anything here that I'd want to trade. There is a failure right here. Actually, it doesn't really break higher, but it looks like one. But it looks too congested. So just wait, and you can see it does. It ends up just going sideways, even though that would have worked. But I don't see anything in there long or short that I would want to take. And it drops on down, and of course it's testing this breakout area again, and it holds again. Again, I don't see anything I'd want to take to go long, and we're just going sideways here. And then suddenly you get a triple test here, once, twice, three times. Right off the high, we've been going back and forth high to low, so you would expect prices to go at least here, and they just kind of drop on down. And you get a close outside new low, but there's nothing really else to trade there. Then it bounces and heads up, and you get a close outside, a couple of legs up, and then you get that bearish bar way away from the EMA. And there's actually 1, 2, 3 little surges up there. And just being that far away from the EMA, it's time to come back. And this breakout may end up failing. We may go all the way down, which is what happens, but unfortunately you don't get a runner there. And unfortunately, there is a second entry short there, but no signal bar. And that's kind of sad, because if you just got a little better signal bar, maybe some of you's chart looks a little better than that. If you got a good signal bar there, go short as long as you got room to get out before here, because you might get lucky and catch this right here, and that's what happens. You get this big move, and all they did was trap some longs and then they stopped buying, and off it went. And this whole thing all the way down, that's one of those real strong trends. Every time it comes back to the trend line with a decent signal bar, you really could go short there. So, but the only time I see that is right here and right here, and I didn't mark this one. If you recognize that, maybe you go short here and here, and then you get the close outside and you're working lower. But again, I don't see any decent signal bars here to take a trade, and it breaks out the low side, and it fails eventually, but at first it looks like it's going to hold. And you get this little break up out right here that breaks out of this congestion, which is probably at least going to come back and test that, even if it's going to go higher. It is so close right there to the support resistance we had marked from here that it makes it a little questionable if you should take that inside there. So, but I feel pretty, you almost would assume that we're going to come back and test that, but it may not. So for that reason, I marked it green. I didn't mark it red. We already have a break and new low in place too, plus a failed break lower. And then it breaks out the low side. I didn't mark this one. This is another one. You might take it because you might catch an important low, which you would have going into the close, and it actually went much higher. And that's why I tend to like these type trades that break out and reverse like this. And every once in a while, this will fail. It'll make one more push down or something, but you only have to catch a couple of these. I'm real hesitant to tell people you need to be experienced to trade this, I guess you should say, because if you get it wrong and you're not a very good trader already, it's just going to hurt your bottom line. If you're a good trader and you're mostly profitable, yeah, you may take a hit there, but if you catch one of these occasionally, you'll more than make up for it. But if you're a break-even or not even break-even kind of trader, you're just going to set yourself back because one loss is not worth it for you. So hopefully that makes sense. This is a more experienced trade, especially like this, because here you're at least getting short with a trend. Here you're counter trend trading. But if you catch it right, you see what happens. I mean, you could have easily traded this one up to where it finally closes, breaks lower outside, and that would have been, that's 9 points or so, $400 something on a single contract. Those will add up for you. And every now and then you'll catch the one like this one that comes all the way down. And if you could have caught, let's just say this signal bar would have been right. Of course it wasn't, but we're just saying what ifs. I mean, if you rode that all the way down to you got the first close outside the uh, channel there, a single, that's 44 points. A single contract would have made you $2,225. That's what I'm trying to get at. It makes it, if you can catch those. And that took us into 230, nothing else there. So, I mean, it was a lot of movement here for not a whole lot of opportunity, not a lot of opportunity to catch it, unfortunately. So it's just the way it goes sometimes. But lots of trades today, plenty of chance to make money. Obvious range kind of day. It got a little dicey up here trying to decide if we were going to go higher or not, but obviously we didn't. And we'll have to see what tomorrow brings. Just looking at the chart, it's hard to know still. I mean, it doesn't look like we're going higher, but we may not go lower either. We're probably just going to chop around a little bit until the market finally finds either some support or the selling comes back in again and it drops some more. So it's just hard to know even looking at the daily chart. Let's go back and look at it one more time. Okay, and here's what I was trying to explain. This is not just like this wasn't rejection. I talked about that yesterday. I said it's hard to know what's going to happen. We're just kind of chopping around here. Probably go lower. Well, we may go lower still. There's nothing says we're about to rally out of here. There's no rejection, anything like that. In fact, we've got two sideways bars that make lower highs and lower lows for the day. So we're still working lower, and we close lower. And we're actually, although this doesn't amount to anything, it's hard to know anything about that at this point, where prices are turning back down, it looks like. So anyway, it's just really hard to know. We're very oversold though still. You see we're back down here at the brown line and they oversold again. Of course, you see how far we got, how much we got oversold before, so we could still go much lower. But a rally's due at any time, and we could bounce at any time. So we'll just have to see. It's just hard to, a lot of times you can get a good idea where we're headed next on the daily chart, but right now it's just hard to say. And to me, it looks like we're probably going to work lower still, or could work lower. I assume prices are trying to test this low and maybe try to make another new low, and that's what it appears. And they're just really struggling, and no buying, not enough buying's coming in to rally out of here, but they're getting a lot of buying down at this level, so it rallies off that level. Twice we've been down there and it's kind of rallied back. Today it didn't stick though. It stuck this day. I think that was Thursday or Friday. I can't remember what day that was, but it stuck that day. And then this day it didn't stick when it rallied, and this day it didn't stick. And that means we could be going lower. So anyway, I'm going to wrap it up. We'll be back again tomorrow. We'll see what tomorrow brings. I expect more of kind of the same, what we saw the last 2 days. But we'll have to wait and see and let the market show us for certain. But I'm done for today. We'll be back again tomorrow. This is Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we'll see you next time.